So I think I've just had one of the most profound experiences with art that I've ever had in my life. And I'm not saying that it just happened just now before I set down my camera to make this video and record it with my phone covered in a sock on my voice memo because my mic isn't that good. But a couple days ago, I watched Synecdoche, New York, after watching Being John Malkovich and being a fan of Charlie Kaufman's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind script. And then I've also been listening to a lot of Quedeca lately. YouTube musician entering his own sphere. And I listened to I Didn't Mean to Haunt You in between that. I've listened to it before. And I've really kind of lost the words to say. Like, I don't really know what to say about it. And I feel like the best way to get out a train of thought, or at least deal with these thoughts I've had about these two forms of media, is to make a little video where I sit down and talk about it, because both experiences are something I've never experienced before. And so this is me, Richard Pathum Siri, sitting in front of my tarantulas and talking about Charlie Kaufman's Synecdoche, New York, and Quedeca's I Didn't Mean to Haunt You. So I think the most important thing that I've come to acknowledge with Synecdoche, New York, at least, is that I don't think everyone will get it. And I think I understand why most people that I read the letterboxd reviews of seem to not like Synecdoche, New York. I think there is definitely, it can come off pretentious. It can come off trying too hard, and it can come off a bit self-indulgencing and self-masturbatory, kind of an oxymoron. But to me, it showed or reflected something that I've kind of been thinking about for a very long time, and something that I've never really found properly reflected in media. So I've in my first letterboxd review of the film, after finishing watching it and after having sat crying for about 45 minutes after watching the movie, the only words I could think of to properly review, quote unquote, or that film to describe what I just saw it's from William Faulkner's Nobel Prize acceptance speech, which I stole directly from John Green's tweet about Richarlison's goal in the World Cup a couple of years ago. It's a quote that I remember really well, because seeing Richarlison's goal in the World Cup, I felt like nothing like that had happened before. And to see John Green pull from an author that I personally have not read but know of, and find such a perfect quote to describe what I just saw, encapsulated, I think, the absolute wonders of the human spirit. So the William Faulkner quote, which I'm probably going to misquote, is a life's work in the agony and sweat of the human spirit, least of all for, or not for glory, and least of all for profit, to create something out of the human spirit which had not been made before, something along those lines. I probably fucked that up really bad, but that was my immediate reaction after watching Synecdoche, New York, because I had never felt such a way about that. And I guess if you've made it this far and aren't aware yet, spoilers ahead for Synecdoche, New York and Quedeca's I Didn't Mean to Haunt You. I guess a little known fact about me, or something that I do think is special and only pertains to me, is that I think that I'm not going to be able to do the things I want to do before I die. As my body ages, as I can do less and less, I'm afraid that I'm going to die with a fuck ton of regrets and very little to show for myself. Is that because I embarked on a creative field? Is that because I feel like I've struggled to make and maintain relationships throughout a lot of different points in my life? Possibly. But I think I'm aware that all this does build up the human experience. One of my favorite philosophical periods to read is existentialism. I'm a big fan of Ernest Hemingway. I read a lot of transcendentalist literature by Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and a lot of that reflects on how I view nature and our oneness with it. But ultimately, who I am is someone that's worried that I'm going to die without having left a legacy behind. And that terrifies me. And some of my other favorite movies of all time, one of my favorite, probably my favorite movie of all time, is Y Tu Mamá También by Alfonso Cuarón. And that movie, spoilers again, does kind of address the idea of just letting yourself go with life and not trying to withhold yourself away from life's surf, or like the quote, La vida es como la espuma, por eso hay que darse como el mar, which is life is like the surf, so give yourself away like the sea. A lot of that movie does quell a lot of my worries, and I try to recite that whenever I find myself in a situation where I'm like, should I just do it? But I think in Synecdoche, New York, I didn't see a lot of that hopefulness. So I've watched it 3 times now, and the first time I watched it, I missed out on, I think, a lot of the minor details that I picked up in the second and third time. But I think the first time was I understood the struggles that Kathan Cottard went through, the main character. And I saw a lot of myself in Caden, feeling like a lot of your world is just leaving. You feel like he's been given a lot of great things. I'm not complaining. I am in somewhat a point of privilege to be able to be sitting here in front of a camera and in a nice apartment talking about a film that touched me on an artistic, spiritual level. But yet there is a part of him and a part of myself that feels as if it's all not going to last, and you want to create something that lasts. I don't know if any of that makes sense. Caden struggles with the relationships, especially with women in his life, and it feels like he's always stuck in a constant loop of wanting or yearning or pining for different relationships that he's had, and he lets the years go by. The movie starts when he's probably in his 40s, and by the time it's over, he is in his 70s, and he dies. And throughout this whole time, he has this existential dread of stuff that's happening outside the play that we don't really know about. I think that boils down intrinsically to the human experience, and I found it to be a very concise yet meaningful depiction of the struggles that we all go through. And I'm not even mentioning a dialogue yet, but I think Charlie Kaufman did an amazing job boiling the story down to one person who you can put all of someone's anxieties and fears, which I don't even relate to all of them. I know Caden has health anxiety, and he worries a lot about the different stuff that has happened to him throughout the film. Like his piss is a bit more, it's darker, and his stool's gray, and there's blood in his stool. But Coffin manages to put a lot of like fear of wanting to leave a lasting impact, acknowledging your fucked up, lonely being, yet seemingly being able to do nothing about it and letting everything just go by. And I think that's what I love the most about this film, is that Caden is pathetic. But I saw a lot of that patheticness in me, whether that is his inability to move on from certain relationships in his life, his obsession with perfecting a play that ends up never getting shown, and he dies, and his life's work was for nothing. Obviously not to that grand of a scale. I didn't get a MacArthur grant to with millions of dollars and endless years to build something great. It comes down to me as an individual, especially as a quote-unquote creative, someone who does want to get into the film industry, someone who does want to make a movie or 2 or 3 or more in his life. It comes down to me feeling like at some point I will want to perfect something so much, or I want to do something 100% right the whole time, or me wishing that I would leave a lasting impact after I die, yet not being able to come to terms with the fact that it's a universal experience. Everyone is everyone is what Millicent says to Caden towards the end of the film. The end is built into the beginning. That was said on the radio interview at the start of the film, and when Hazel says it to Caden in bed. Both those quotes, I think, reflect that this is not just a me experience. It's a universal experience to whatever capacity that we humans feel like our moment here is short and that we want to leave an impact somehow. And in Caden's case, and in my case, and I'm sure a lot of other people's case, you want to leave it on a greater scale than just your family scale, within your friends. You want to make an impact on the world. And sometimes you feel like all this struggle that you go through, all the pain that you go through, all the hardships that you go through have to mean something, and you want to put it in your work, and it just doesn't, it never comes into fruition because there's always new pain. That's why Caden extends his play for so long. I know Charlie Kaufman, said that he doesn't want to explain everything about the movie because he wants people to relate it to on a personal level. And I'm not claiming anything I have said or will say is necessarily the definitive interpretation of the film. I think this is just how I relate to it. And so I think the biggest thing is the emptiness of Caden and his loneliness in trying to find meaning in his life that he feels like has just gone by. But yet in that search for meaning, it's like an endless loop. And that's probably what I drew from it the most, like immediately after watching the film the first time. And then when Little Person by John Brian, I'm sorry if I mispronounced his name. When Little Person by John Briar comes on, and it's just this incredibly sad, it's melancholic feeling of, this is probably what the end is like for Caden Cotard and for all of us, is this emptiness feeling like we haven't accomplished enough. And I don't know if Kaufman necessarily wanted there to be a message of like, do what you want to do now, love what you love. But I just felt empty and pained and reflected a lot on not just like past relationships, but like my goals and what I do to achieve those goals. And that was my first watch of the film. Like that's immediately where I just sat in silence in front of my computer for like 45 minutes, just sitting there crying, thinking about, what am I leaving behind? What am I doing? And I have never had a film impact me like that before. And that's why I went with the Faulkner quote from, thank you, John Green. As I sat on it a little bit more, a couple of days went by, the film just kept rearing its head. And when I was at work, I thought a lot about like, what did it mean when Hazel bought the burning house? You know, what does it mean when the characters in Caden's play seemingly end up having this complex relationship within the play with each other? What does it mean when Caden gets replaced by Millicent, but Millicent seems to have this memory of Ellen, Adele's housekeeper? Things like this, I don't know necessarily what Charlie Kaufman means, and I'm still thinking about these things. But I think the little pieces that I can discern, that I can pick up and try to piece together from this in my own way, is the human experience. And it's just different facets of the human experience, obviously blended in with quite a bit of black comedy that I picked up on my second watch. But like when Hazel buys the burning house and the realtor says it's a big decision how one prefers to die, I looked up on Reddit. I looked up on Reddit how someone said, oh, it's like how some people, when they end up buying the house they die in. But on my second rewatch, I just thought that it was a metaphor, a surrealist metaphor within the film about how sometimes we can see the danger, but we're willing to live with the dangers because ultimately it's what makes us happy. When Hazel gets together with Derek and they have triplets or 3 twins, really confusing within the burning house. But Hazel's always wanted it. She's always wanted to settle down and buy a place. And despite the dangers, she's happy in it. And that's what I picked up from that. But I think it's to the film's benefit that it doesn't really point you in a direction. It just details you all these little like different fragments of Caden's life as he ages and the people around him. On my third rewatch, I watched it with the script in the second monitor. I was making notes and just reading along, and a lot was omitted that I felt like could have provided more context, and I think it's to the film's benefit. Obviously, I don't know how Kaufman would have directed it if they shot it, all these deleted scenes, how that would have played out in the final cut, but I think it gave me more ideas of what Kaufman intended, but also really reflected a lot of how subjective it is with how Kaufman writes and how much he really wants it to. Maybe he had a style in mind, an idea in mind, a direction in mind when he directed it on set or what he told the actors. But in the script, it's almost as vague as the movie. You're just left to piece these things together. But I think that's an experience of life too, is that you never really get this clear direction or annotation or a director coming to you and telling you that this is what you're supposed to feel. Sometimes it's just a feeling, and it's just a thought that comes by, and you try to make sense of it. But I also think that some people just don't understand it, and I think that's perfectly fine. Probably the thing that pertains to that the most is where people are differently when they think about their mortality and where they are in life and what they've accomplished, is when Caden tells, I think, Tom in Death of a Salesman that he may only be pretending to think that he's at a life full of despair, but the tragedy is that at some point he will end up in that same place of desolation. And Tom doesn't pick it in. I didn't pick it up the first time either. The second time it hit me that I really don't know what it's like to be at the end. I can pretend all I want. I can feel all these feelings that I get after watching this film, but at the end, it's a feeling only very few of us can live to tell, obviously, and yet it's a universal experience. What we feel right towards the end of this loneliness, of this emptiness, and when you feel that now, when you feel that loneliness, emptiness now, and you're trying to figure out why you're so unhappy and why you struggle with positive thoughts, or trying to move on with a creative project, or just trying to form a meaningful connection, and you wonder why it doesn't work, and you try to trace it all back like this. And I'm sorry, I'm referencing the preacher's monologue here after Millicent as Caden gives them direction, but you really try to find reasons for your own unhappiness, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. You just can't do that, and you wait for something to come along until it's all right, but sometimes it never comes. And that is, on my second rewatch, at least, that point in the film is what broke it. And I'm not going to understand all the pieces of this film. I know YMS has a series on Synecdoche, New York. I've only watched part one, but he really analyzed a lot of the technical aspects, which I'm not going to pretend like I understand that every single technical aspect was intentional, but I do know that the intention was for us to find meaning and find, whether that's our how pitiful and pathetic Caden Cotard is, or whatever. Like, I think Kaufman's idea was to try to get us to just find these little fragments of our life that we relate to. And I don't know what the result of this movie is. I don't know what it wants me to do. Because the first time after watching it, like I said, I felt despair, sadness, emptiness. Second time, I came across more neutral, like I should get doing the things I want to do. And then the third time, which was yesterday when I watched it while reading the script, I just came across more the same. Like, this is just how life is going to be. You're going to overthink all this stuff. You're going to have worries. And like the preacher says at the funeral scene, it's fuck everybody. It's you alone that deals with your own feelings that everyone else feels, if that makes sense. Everyone feels these feelings of death, impending mortality, your hypochondria, you're feeling like you're not good enough, your worries about your broken relationships, your worries about your broken family, your struggles to be happy. Everyone has those. You say fuck everybody and you feel it yourself. It's incredible. I've never had this experience with art before. And where I'm going with Quedeca's I Didn't Mean to Haunt You was, I listened to that album when I first came out. I'm a big Quedeca fan. From Me to You, I think has quite a few bangers. Sisyphus, I still think is one of the greatest songs ever made. I don't listen to that much music. I listen to a lot of music, and I think Sisyphus is really good. I bump Maybe Another Day a lot. His new album Scrapyard, or mixtape Scrapyard, a la carte and Texas Blue are probably going to be my top songs of the year. But I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, I thought was really well produced, but I could never fully grasp the idea of the concept album, of the concept album, because it's supposed to be from a dead person's perspective, looking in on a life that they're not part of anymore. And then I listened to it after, like the day after, I watched Synecdoche, New York for the first time, and I think that gave me a different perspective on the album, because oftentimes we feel like a dead man walking in our daily lives, and sometimes that feeling of isolation and loneliness, that you're barred from the lives of other people and things that you wish you could be a part of, is basically looking in from the other side. And I could finally put myself into I Didn't Mean to Haunt You's perspective. It's the idea that you wish that you were still a part of life every day as we know, but yet you feel so isolated and alone, and you're looking from the other side, and things feel different. And especially when you're contemplating a lot of negative thoughts, not necessarily on the topic of self-harm, but like when you feel like the world would be a bit better off without you, you really get this insight into how much is going to go by without you. And I think that I felt like it really tied into Synecdoche, New York, because you're here for a fraction. Before you were born, there was nothing in your consciousness, and after you die, there will be nothing in your consciousness. And that's how it ends for everybody, how it starts and how it ends for everybody. And I Didn't Mean to Haunt You really tied into that, because essentially, if you feel isolated from the people in your life or the events of the world going by, you're feeling what the world would be like without you. And it really hit, especially with a lot that's been going on with me personally. I've been thinking a lot about a lot of stuff, evaluating a lot of my life and relationships I've had, and where I'm going, which direction I'm going. And I know that I don't have all the answers, but I do know that it's a universal experience that you don't have all the answers. And it sucks feeling like I Didn't Mean to Haunt You is such a relatable album, but it at that point it became really relatable, where I am, a lot of times when I do spend a lot of nights thinking a lot, or where I end up not being able to sleep and feeling like I'm the next day or for a while, like all these, where this constant train of negative thoughts and overthinking is just circling in my head, and that noise just gets loud to the point where I feel like I'm just a passive observer to what's happening nearby. It's not a good feeling, but I Didn't Mean to Haunt You made it feel less alone, and that it's gonna suck when you do end up leaving, and whatever your answer is about an afterlife, it's that things go on without you. And you do what you can while you're still here. And I don't necessarily have an answer from watching or observing these two forms of media. I just know that they reached me on a level that I've never reached before. I think they're both worthwhile for you if you were not just an appreciator of film, but someone who does struggle with self-identity and self-worth and creative direction. Not even creative direction, I just think life direction, and worrying about what happens after you die, all these fears of not ever doing enough before your death. I think both of these forms, both I Didn't Mean to Haunt You and Synecdoche, New York, are things that you'll really enjoy. And I say give it a chance. I know there's other media out there that people really like, that already kind of address this. I haven't seen 8.5, which is a film that apparently is similar to Synecdoche, New York. It's on my watch list. I haven't seen The Worst Person in the World, which a lot of friends have recommended me to watch. Even just having all these forms of media shows that it's a universal experience. Everyone is everyone, and it's still lonely somehow trying to navigate these feelings. So I think it's worthwhile watching Synecdoche, New York. Maybe you'll get something different out of it. Maybe you'll think it was the most boring, self-indulgent, self-destructive, most pathetic movie in the world, which I can see. Or maybe you'll find a little bit of yourself in Caden Cotard. Maybe you'll find a little bit of yourself in Adele. Maybe you'll find a little bit of yourself in one of the characters in the film. Maybe you find that the play itself is your own escape from reality, your creative escape from reality into a world where you feel like you have some semblance of control that you can extend forever. Maybe I Didn't Mean to Haunt You will show you that there will be a life that happens without you, and while you're here now, there's different ways you can try your best to experience, or it's just something that you can relate to, and you can just let the sadness out with it. And I think that's the amazing part about art, and a reason why I want to keep doing it. And it's hard, and it's difficult, and I struggle with it a lot, amongst other things, that just as we all do. And obviously there are a million things I wish I could do, say, read, watch, write. And there will be those regrets on my deathbed. But we will return to nothing. And I don't have an answer. I don't have a positive thing, really, to leave this video on. It's a feeling that I think has been amplified, an existing feeling that I've had that's been amplified, and there's not necessarily an answer from watching the movie Synecdoche, New York, and listening to I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, but it showed me that there is something out there, someone out there that at the very least is going through what you're going through. So I recommend both of these. I've linked my letterboxd, I guess. I've linked my letterboxd down below. If you end up watching Synecdoche, New York, reply to one of my reviews of it, I guess, and just let me know what you think. Or I can go check your review. But if anyone who watches this, I don't even know who's going to watch this. No one wants to watch some guy talk about media that's impacted his life, or I don't even know how I've been recording for. But if you watched it this far and you end up enjoying it, you know me in person, I'd love to talk to you about it. If you don't know me and if you ever meet me in person, I'd love to talk about both of these, Synecdoche, New York, and I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, because I can proudly say that both of these are forms of media that have changed my life, and whatever that change is, I'm feeling it. I just don't know what it is, and I don't pin it down. I just know that it's something that I've never experienced before, and as I watch more medias, maybe I'll experience again. Anyway, rambled on for quite a bit. This is probably one of the funniest things you've ever seen. One of my socks on my phone as a microphone. Yeah. Well, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. I hope you have a good day, good night, whenever you're watching this, wherever you're watching this. And I will never make a video like this again, but I'll see you on my channel some other time, I guess, whenever I upload again. Thank you.